Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Great Big Murderbots from Earth, written by Chapathing. I just don't get it, muttered Zendo through the binoculars. I get the how, but I don't understand is the why. Another impact sent dirt and a few heavily armored corpses flying. Can we not have this debate right now? I screamed over the mic, as 100-foot colossus of hardened steel and gun barrels stomped terrifyingly close to our foxhole. But look at it, screamed Zendo. That thing must have taken out an enormous amount of scientific and industrial resources to create. The time invested could easily produce thousands of sets of powered armor. It's so inefficient, it makes me want to pull my antenna out. And yet it's kicking our rear, so could we please focus fire on the giant metal death thingy? I popped out of the foxhole and took a few pot shots at the exposed ankle joint of the Colossus with my heavy fusion rifle. Zendo continued to rant. And so many weak spots, he said, as he loaded another plasma warhead into his launcher. A traditional armored vehicle of that size would be vulnerable, sure, but it wouldn't have nearly the same number of points of failure. I loaded another hydrogen cell into my rifle. Speaking of weak spots, could you please shoot at them? I'd hate to interrupt your lecture, but I'd rather not die with you being the last person I talk to. I just find it odd is all, said Zendo. Can you find it odd and shoot at the same time, please? I shouted. Zendo rolled his eyes as he shouldered the rocket launcher and fired the magnetically charged warhead at the ankle of the giant construct. The plasma melted anything not made of hardened steel, and the joint seized up, giving us a moment of reprieve. Just think about it, he continued. Me experimented with them in the early 2420s, sure, but even we knew that they were more trouble than they were worth. He was cut off as the destroyer-sized gun mounted in one of the Titan's hands erupted in a wall of orange light. While my retinas were repaired by nanobots, I heard the distinctive sound of a building providing us with covering fire being reduced into slag. You know, now that you mention it, it is a little bit of overkill, I said, despite all attempts to break the conversation with Zendo. Do you think it's pride? Asked Zendo, who was fumbling with the muddy foxhole for another plasma warhead. I felt it against my Atman and tossed it towards him. I could hear it clank against his exterior armor. Pride? I asked curiously. Zendo scoffed. It has to be pride. It must be pride, he said confidently. What makes you say that? I asked. A hail of rockets surged forth from the mech's shoulders. Moments later, the distinctive shriek of their missile sirens filled our heads as they flew overhead to destroy what I assumed was something of ours that was either devastatingly expensive, crucial for our survival, or both. My sight was coming back, and I could see very clearly, easily 20 pounds of grey goo microbots repairing the damage that we'd done to the ankle joint. Zendo fired another rocket at the other ankle joint to buy us more time. Think about it. Primitive species who barely crossed the equilibrium threshold for their robotics. Oh God, don't remind me of that war. Who thought that it was a good idea to hook up an AI directly to superweapons? I said. Without bothering to raise my head above the foxhole, I emptied my fusion rifle to the surrounding landscape, confident that I'd hit at least one human. I know, right? Said Zendo, and was looking for the last warhead which was tucked between his legs. I'll protect my life by destroying it and preserving DNA so that technically I'm not killing you. Who programmed that AI? Anyways, off topic. So here we have a species that, let's face it, isn't as technologically advanced as us. I laughed. Hasn't stopped them from kicking our ears, I said. On cue, the comms broke into panic as the mech raised its arms and sprayed everything 50 feet rear of us in burning hot plasma. They do have an underdog complex to them, don't they? Said Zando as he tossed a grenade over the lip of the foxhole. As I was saying, they know that we have tech advantage. So what do? I nodded. Build a great fuck-off robot with enough guns and armor on it to make every engineer, general, and tech acolyte develop a great throbbing murder erection, I finished. And yet somehow it works, said Zendo. I wonder why. At this moment, our comms was interrupted by another voice. "Because stupid Xenos get confused and start a lecture in a foxhole," the voice said. Zendo and I looked up to see several thousand armor-clad human soldiers with a gun a third the size of him and pointing a barrel end towards us. I laughed and surrendered, because if a species can win with something as inefficient as that, they deserve it. End of story. Story number 2. Impossible to Occupy, written by Incredibilis Ha. There's quite an interesting theme throughout humanity's history. As soon as a national identity was created, nations became harder and harder to occupy. Nationalism in itself is quite an alien concept to us Decanians. Pride of one's tribe, one's family, we understand. It is in our mutual interest to care about others so that we might accomplish greater things together. But pride, not of yourself, your tribe, your building, your species, or your family, but of a government and land it is settled upon, that surprises us. Most species, when they achieve spaceflight, are unified. Nationalism, tribalism, and hubris exist only in the beginning stages of any given species' development. So when humans discovered FTL travel, not due to an urge to explore, not due to the need for more land, and not due to an urge to conquer, but due to interspecies rivalries, we were surprised. The humans were fractured, broken, and split into dozens of pieces. Easy pickings. Or, at least, that is what us Decanians thought. We were a race of warriors, conquerors, and strategists. Courage and honor are our greatest virtues. We attempted to conquer one of their fractured nations. The other human nations cheered us on. They seemed almost happy. The human nation was a pushover. Between our superior training, technology, and physical strength, they collapsed within 3 months. Yet, this is where a major problem started. See, we may have won in the conventional war, but we didn't win the war of the hearts and minds of the humans we conquered. Humans didn't see war for what it was, the obtaining of an object, but rather they saw a second stage in every war, the holding onto that object. The object, in this case, were the 15 planets we conquered, and we didn't realize the stage existed before it was too late. Nationalism is a double-edged blade. We merely thought of it as radical hatred, unjustified genocide, and the need to feel superior. But it can also manifest itself as something which motivates people to fight for the things that they hold dear. It motivates them to fight for their families, their values, and their people. When one looks back into humanity's history, we should have seen this coming. How many times has this not happened? There's a reason humanity isn't unified. It's not because they aren't social enough or lack the technology for it. It is because of the pride of each one of them holds for their people. This feeling of pride has motivated acts of incredible barbarism and cruelty. But it can also motivate one to stand and fight. Hubris is mankind's blight, but they shall also make it our blight. The first stages of occupation were turbulent, but that was to be expected. But the flame of resistance didn't die out. Years after the war had officially ended, human fighters were still fighting, ambushing, raiding, and ravaging our cities and patrols. Most of the planets we conquered still looked like war zones. We gained nothing. The humans also gained nothing, but they made us bleed, and that was enough for them. Humanity is dangerous, not because they are exceptionally smart, strong, or cunning, but because they simply won't stop. Now 3 decades after the invasion, we are forced to abandon the planets we conquered, thousands sent to the grave in vain. I hope no one else will try and attempt to invade them. They will succeed. They'll just not hold on. End of story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I just quickly want to thank the Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Alithia Barkey, Cam Maxwell, Caspar Arnholtz, Albarden Guster, Arcadian, Lord Azrakal, and Joachim Backer.